Thank you, everyone, for taking time to be here. This is one of the most exciting and interesting and important topics that we think people could dive into that's presented here at AWE. Hardly really need to talk about benefits of AR to the group that's here, right? From the benefits to architects and designers, field personnel, the ability to provide remote expert assistance to people that are out in the field. Unfortunately, all of the great sensors and capabilities that these headsets offer also open up the doorways to some really unfortunate possible ways that they can be exploited. We've talked to a little over 100 people in the past year, or surveyed over 100 people in past year related to cybersecurity and their thoughts about it, what their concerns are, and how they're approaching it in their companies and with their solutions. What we have here now are an increasing number of people that you'll see in presentations here who are talking about the return on investment that are being proved out and how these AR solutions are really becoming something that definitely have value. Unfortunately, they're getting stopped from production deployment by the IT departments and the security groups, the mobility groups. And so when, in fact, there's a gentleman who's a prominent thought leader in this space, and he says the top 3 concerns that are preventing AR from proliferating in the enterprise is security, security, and security. So we've got people in warehouses, industrial environments, manufacturing environments, in power plants. They're walking around with these really great headsets on. They have all these different sensors, and they're gathering all kinds of data. And that data is either staying on the sensors or it's going somewhere. It's going through gateways out into the world, wherever that is. And then we've also got data that's coming back into the headsets, potentially. So who's responsible for this data? And who knows what it is and where it's going? This is knowable, but it has to be addressed. What about simultaneous content? It's one thing when you have an AR application, you're working with it. But what happens when I have 4 different AR applications going at the same time, and they're sharing input and output devices, and they're sharing data, and they're sharing their APIs? How does that work? How do you manage and create a higher degree of trust in this kind of environment? And then a common question that seems to be coming up is, who should pay for this kind of security reviews and instilling security? And as we start to think about it, we kind of flip it on its head and say, well, who of you out there wants to be the one that's culpable when somebody gets killed, or some sort of intellectual property is stolen, or production grinds to a halt because something's gone awry? So and we're just getting started, right? We're just beginning to deploy these things in real environments. And where we're headed is something much more spectacular and exciting in the possibilities and challenging from a security perspective. So we say that it's time for an adult conversation about this topic. And it's important to understand that up until now, the people who manufacture devices, who put together software solutions and platforms, and even the people who are beginning to put together the pilots, they've been keeping all of the features and functionality wide open because they want to explore every possible way that these things can be an advantage. But now we need to start buttoning that up as we begin to go look at deployment. Enterprise managers who want to implement their solutions are going to want to take some proactive steps to help their IT security people and their mobility people certify these solutions and then get the executive approvals that they need in order to deploy. The device vendors and application developers, they're going to want to harden their solutions in the various ways that they can, and not only that, but help be able to communicate what they've done with their solution to people as a marketing distinguishing factor, a market differentiator. And then system integrators certainly want to be able to communicate with their clientele and help educate them on what the various aspects of security are as they integrate these solutions into larger enterprise systems. And they certainly don't want to be held or find themselves in a position where they've helped create a liability in fact or in perception. So last year at this time, we presented 2 reports that our Brainwave team had completed for the AR for Enterprise Alliance. The first report is on risk and management. And this is where we dove into a comprehensive reporting on research that we had done out in the industry to find out who's done what in this area, what's available as far as tools are, what are some best practices, and how we arrived at the conclusion that, there actually is a lot that's lacking in these areas. So we have to, together, put something in place that can help begin the conversations. The second report is the result of that. It's the security framework and test protocol, which is designed to be a practical guideline for everyone in the stakeholder spectrum to begin looking at the topic of cybersecurity related to these AR solutions in the enterprise. I'm going to go over a few of the key findings. The first thing is that AR headsets are unique. They are not like anything else. They can't be treated as a standard mobile device with mobile device management and mobile application management suites, although that's a start. It's just that it's not comprehensive enough. They don't benefit from the sort of procedures and policies that are already in place for common enterprise IT or mobility solutions. There aren't policies and procedures, ports aren't closed, user logs aren't being kept, and as far as the devices themselves go, the operating systems are pretty much stock. They're not being hardened specifically. There are all kinds of really interesting but unique user interfaces. We've got gestures, we've got gaze tracking now, we've got voice interactions. So another part is that these things are tightly linked to the environment. All of these sensors are gathering all of this data, massive amount of data. It's being collected and stored on the device, or also shipped off of the device. And that includes spatial mapping, which is a whole really interesting and challenging area if you're looking at it from a security perspective. How fantastic that capability is and how much it opens you up to vulnerabilities. Finally, another one is that the stakeholders across the spectrum, these are the end customers, the business managers who are looking to put these type of AR solutions into place, the system integrators, the individual component vendors, okay? All of these folks seem to be passing the buck when it comes to security. The hardware guys say, well, we're pretty much standard. We got our hardware, and that's the security we provide. And the software, the application guys say, well, we're taking care of our piece, but that's really up to the system integrator or the end customer. And the integrator's going, well, yeah, security is important, but these guys need to provide some pieces. So there's no one taking charge of being responsible for the whole thing, nor should there necessarily be. Okay? Everybody has a part to play. So we also looked across other standards and best practices that are out there. There's no need to invent something new. So what we found is that there is some great stuff, and where those standards are applicable, we highly recommend that people attend to those, but there were some gaps, so we created a new additional element to sit on top. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So the surveys that we've done over the past year really represent a range of stakeholders, and the surveys say that the state of enterprise cybersecurity is fractured, it's inconsistent, it's confusing or non-existent. I'd like to draw your attention to the bottom here where I have a SurveyMonkey link. Okay, this survey is live right now, and we would love for you guys at some point today to go out and do it. It takes 2 minutes, and it's at the bottom of every one of our slides as we go through here, so you guys can make sure and get to it. When we ask what the top security concerns were, mainly it's what data is being collected and where is that data going? Is it leaking out? Who can access it? What's happening with it? We had one, there's like, what do you mean? We had one saying, what do you mean spatial mapping? But it's sort of indicative of a larger area about this spatial mapping piece. And then mainly the theme is, we're not quite sure. We don't know what we don't know. So this slide represents where we've looked at existing standards, the NIST cybersecurity framework that provides some great best practices. The OWASP is the Open Web Application Security Project, which provides some guidelines and resources for people who want to secure IoT and mobile devices. The IEEE Cybersecurity Initiative, which is attempting to become and is becoming a really nice go-to resource. They also have sandboxes available to sort of play with and test some things out. So those are on the level of risk analysis and threat assessment. In the area of actually looking at security design, we've got the ISO and IEC standards, the 27,000 family of standards, some really great work. And then the Industrial Internet Consortium, one of the primary global groups dealing with the Internet of Things, has written an industrial internet security framework, and one of our Brainwave members was a co-author on that. And it's a really comprehensive framework for how to deal with IoT in an industrial environment. So all of those have things that are very valuable. And on top of that, then, we built this area cybersecurity framework to help try to fill in those gaps. And by the way, this is a dynamic thing. It's not one and done. There are 3 phases in the framework. I'm going to get you a little bit familiar with the framework, and then we'll talk about practical things that you guys can do. So the first thing is, in the framework, there are 3 phases. The first is to identify security requirements. It is up to the end user, the end customer, to figure out what the security requirements need to be, and then they need to flow those requirements down to their system integrator, their system provider, subsystem provider, down to the component level, and then the component guys provide their elements of trust up to the next level, who validates it, provides it up all the way to the top when the end user then validates that their requirements are being met. In each one of these phases, by the way, we have various goals that need to be accomplished, and then the methods that can be used in order to accomplish those goals. Phase 2 is evaluation of the security design specifically. So I'm going to use this kind of device, I'm going to use it in this use case, I'm going to have these kind of roles that are going to be using it in this environment. Phase 3 is penetration testing, where you work to try to drill in and find vulnerabilities. The first step, phase 1, is identify security requirements. The easiest way to do this is to break it down into the various IT information system elements, all the way from the headset at the top through all of the local resources into the cloud and the platform that you might be using, into the enterprise tier. Around each one of those, we've drawn trust boundaries. So within that, we can create a measure of trust. But outside of that, it can't be guaranteed initially. And then we put in tier borders here. And in each one of these trust boundaries, then, we've identified various threat vectors that people could potentially use to get into that. We're going to drill in just in one area, which is on the AR device itself, obviously of most interest here. Oops. Can you go forward one, please? I think I hit the wrong button here. The IEC and also the Electric Power Research Institute and Paris Consulting have put together several different pieces of a model that drills down into the components that are inside AR headsets from a functional perspective, and they've developed an interoperability framework. So each one of these components, then, we look at those from a threat perspective, also the pathways of the information, and then where information comes off of the headset to external sources, whether you're gathering data on the physical world to help provide context, whether it's middleware to help create the scene that the composed scene that you're viewing and taking advantage of, or whether it's communicating with outside resources. The phase 2 is the evaluation of the security design, and there's a framework that we've put together here. Unfortunately, device vendors, solution vendors generally, application vendors, haven't really been forthcoming in, here's how we're addressing security. And so what we want to do is try to give them some help in that arena. If they can go through and from a methodical fashion, talk about the various levels of the stack of elements necessary to have these solutions work, from the physical security, the root of trust, identity management, identity of the device, identity of the user, then we can create something that they can use and the end users can use to have conversations, structured, constructive conversations about it. Definitely not going to go into the details of this, but we broke down the categories of the types of threats that one would experience coming from the requirements area and then down into the designs. And in each one of these areas, and this provides a real method for all of the stakeholders to begin to focus their energy, because you don't need Fort Knox security on all elements of your system. You don't need to protect against every threat that's out there. You just need to hit the main ones, and it also depends on the amount of resources that you have available, which gets back to who's going to pay for this kind of solution. In phase 3 penetration testing, we found that there are 3 main points that a nefarious character might try to exploit related to an AR headset. The first is the AR headset as an end device. So they're going to want to get into that device, take advantage of the data that's there, take advantage of the sensors, basically exploit that device. The second one is the device as an injection point. So how can they use that device to tunnel through it and get into other network resources potentially? The third one's really interesting, called a vector transition. This is where somebody drills into the device, is watching, surveilling the data that's being collected, but they're doing it in order to create some other type of exploit. An example is this headset spatially mapping everything around me, including all of the entrances and exits and the activity of people going back and forth and the location of security cameras, right? So I can do a lot with that actually doesn't have to, exploit the device itself. Oops. So this is the call to action. This is what needs to happen. Literally, everyone who's in the entire AR stakeholder spectrum needs to begin having conversations about security whenever they're talking with anyone else related to their solutions internally and with their external partners and end customers. Particularly, you've got to get your IT security people in these enterprises involved. It sounds silly, but one of the greatest things you could do is get your IT departments a headset and let them have it and play with it with the software on it. Let them get involved, and you will find a lot more accommodation. Then we need to start using a structured methodology for stepping through evaluating security in these kind of solutions. And then ultimately the result is going to be that you're going to be able to stand up with confidence and talk about where your solutions are strong, where they need to have more attention. You're going to get your funding faster, you're going to get your approvals faster, and you're going to ultimately produce better business results. Quickly throw in our Brainwave team, of course, is here to help in any way. We'd be happy to answer questions here at the conference or afterwards. We're easy to find. And we've got over 200 collective years of experience in emerging technology consulting and cybersecurity. So happy to help. Thank you very much. How are we doing on time?
Hi, Tony. Some questions for you, I expect.
Okay. What do you propose as a standard for two-factor authentication, wireless denied environment? That is not a question for me, but I can get an answer to this question. Who asked that question?
Hands up.
Yeah, okay, great. Let's talk. I need to connect you with Frank. And then what does enabling BitLocker on the HoloLens actually protect? And that is another good question that I'll have. Who asked that question? It's bright up here. Okay, so I can't tell you the answer to that, but we can get it for you. So, okay, thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.